Chapter 10, Mishnah 2. We learned in the previous Mishnah that gifts, forelegs, jaws, and stomach, are given only from Chullin, unconsecrated animals, and not from korbanos. The following Mishnah discusses whether the gifts must be given from a korban that has a permanent blemish that disqualifies it from being offered on the Mizbeach. This question depends on whether the animal developed the blemish before or after it was designated as a korban. When someone consecrates a pure, unblemished animal that is fit for the Mizbeach, it gains physical sanctity, i.e. a sanctity of a korban. If it later develops a disqualifying blemish, it may no longer be offered on the Mizbeach, but it is still sacred. The blemished korban is redeemed by exchanging it for money. Its sanctity is thereby transferred to the money, which is used to buy a new korban. Even after its redemption, though, the animal has a remnant of sanctity, which makes it subject to certain restrictions, as this Mishnah shall teach. In the opposite case, where the animal developed a blemish first and was consecrated later, it gains only monetary sanctity. The animal does not have the sanctity of a korban, but its monetary value is sacred, meaning that when it is redeemed, the money is holy and must be used to buy a korban. Upon being redeemed, this type of blemished animal loses even its monetary sanctity and becomes Chullin in every respect. 4 situations will be discussed in this Mishnah. First, the Mishnah will deal with an animal that had a permanent blemish when it was consecrated. The Mishnah will state the laws that apply after it is redeemed and before it is redeemed. Then the Mishnah will deal with an animal that was unblemished or had only a temporary blemish when it was consecrated, but developed a permanent blemish later. Here too, it will state the laws that apply after it is redeemed and before it is redeemed. We now turn to the words of the Mishnah. All korbanos that had a permanent blemish before they were consecrated and after being consecrated were redeemed are treated as ordinary, unconsecrated animals, Chullin. As such, they are subject to the law of Bechor, that is, if their firstborn is a male, it has the status of a Bechor offering. And the law of the gifts, that is, after slaughtering the animal, the owner must give its foreleg, jaw, and stomach to a Kohen. And upon being redeemed, they leave their consecrated state to enter a completely unconsecrated state, in which they are permitted to be shorn of their wool and put to work. And their offspring and their milk that emerge after their redemption are permitted. Since the korban had a permanent disqualifying blemish at the time it was consecrated, it gained only monetary sanctity, not physical sanctity. Then, when it was redeemed, it lost even that lower level of sanctity and became completely unconsecrated, Chullin. It is thus subject to all the laws of an unconsecrated animal. One must give its bechor and its gifts to a Kohen. One may shear off its wool, use it for work, and have benefit from its offspring and milk. Having stated laws that apply to this animal after it is redeemed, when it has no sanctity at all, the Mishnah now states laws that apply to it before it is redeemed, when it has monetary sanctity. Someone who slaughters them outside the temple courtyard is exempt from kares, the usual penalty for slaughtering korbanos outside the courtyard. And they do not make a tamura, that is, if someone designates another animal to replace the blemished korban, the second animal does not become sacred. And if they die without shechita, they can still be redeemed. All the previous laws are based on the rule that korbanos blemished at the time of their consecration have only monetary sanctity. The Mishnah names 2 exceptions to this rule. These laws apply to all korbanos except for the bechor and meiser offerings. If a bechor or meiser offering was blemished at the time it was consecrated, it does not have monetary sanctity. Rather, it has a reduced level of physical sanctity. Its laws are similar to those of other korbanos that became blemished after they were consecrated and were then redeemed, which are taught next. The Mishnah now deals with korbanos that were consecrated first and became blemished later, which have physical sanctity. All korbanos that were consecrated before they became blemished, or that had a temporary blemish before they were consecrated and then developed a permanent blemish after the consecration and were then redeemed, are subject to the following rules. They are exempt from the laws of Bechor and the gifts, that is, their firstborn are not Bechor offerings, and their owners are not obligated to give their gifts to a Kohen. And upon being redeemed, they do not leave their consecrated state to enter a completely unconsecrated state, in which they are permitted to be shorn of their wool and be put to work. Rather, it is still forbidden to shear their wool or use them for work. And their offspring and milk that emerge after their redemption are forbidden. A korban that was unblemished or had only a temporary blemish when it was consecrated has physical sanctity. It remains sacred even if it then develops a permanent blemish. Furthermore, redeeming this blemished korban does not make it completely unconsecrated. The animal keeps some degree of sanctity, which is enough to exempt it from the laws of Bechor and the gifts, and to forbid sharing it, working it, and benefiting from its offspring and milk. Having stated laws that apply to this animal after it is redeemed, when it has a remnant of sanctity, the Mishnah now states laws that apply before its redemption, when, although blemished, it still has physical sanctity. One who slaughters them outside the temple courtyard is liable to the punishment of kares, the punishment for slaughtering korbanos outside the courtyard. They make a tamura, that is, if another animal is designated as a replacement for one of these blemished korbanos, the second animal becomes sacred. And if they died without shechita, they can no longer be redeemed, but must be buried.